Hello students, I'm Devyani Kapoor and I am your sociology teacher. It's very unfortunate that in this scenario we have to conduct online classes. I would have loved to come and meet you personally and take this class physically. But at the moment, we must make the best use of the situation, be committed, and remain positive. So let's begin. Sociology, unlike other subjects, is a subject which is the study of society. The knowledge of society naturally comes to you. The subject is such, unlike history, geography, physics, where you are at level 0 and there is a teacher or you have to gain knowledge. In this, you already are at a level and the knowledge is coming naturally to you. The this thing both has advantages and disadvantages. So yes, advantages that you already know the subject because by the time you come and in 11th 12th and you take up sociology, because it is made up of portion of history, portion of your political science, constitution, so your knowledge is already there, knowledge of society. So the advantage is the subject is not unfamiliar to you. When I look at the disadvantage, this is a point of concern. There are two aspects to this. One is our knowledge is biased. The other is it is not complete. It is limited. We are biased because we are nurtured in a way, and that's the way we look at the world. Without understanding there's a bigger world which exists beyond, and to complete these, address these concerns, when we study sociology, we kind of, study, we balance it out, we understand what is the perspective of the other person, how, for example, the stereotypes of gender has been there ever since. But once you are a sociology student, you understand that gender feminism is not about any women being the better gender or things like that. It is about gender equality. Now, let us look at some concepts of sociology. So, first thing is that I take up is self reflexivity. First thing is your self reflexivity. What you learn in sociology is a concept called self reflexivity. And self reflexivity is again reflecting on what you already know and what you imbibe. Is it right what I am doing? Is caste distinction or discrimination right? Is gender inequality right? So this is the first thing that you come up with and you develop when you become a student of sociology, is the self-reflexivity. Then another concept that I want to touch here today is something regarding the social map. What is social map? You know about the various geographical maps and all, but this term social map is about locating yourself in the society. It is about locating yourself, who you are, where your position. So if you look at this picture, this map, and this is social map. So suppose I would want you to create a social map in your notebooks. Children, you are expected to create a social map. So if you look at it, social map, and when you create it, what is your age? What is your caste? What is your nationality? What is the region you belong to? Then what is the religion you belong to, what is the region in which you live, then what is the occupational structure of your parents, for example, which income group do they fall into. And thirdly, lastly, it is about which social groups do you adhere to or are members of. For example, being a student, you could be a member of student council, you could be a member of the Rotary Club, Interact Club, and so on. It is very important because when you place yourself in the society, you understand, you build a perspective about others who are there in the society. So, of course, there'll be worksheet that will be following with this. You can refer to the worksheet and kindly do the following questions in your note. So, this is the social map we are talking about. The next concept, children, I want to take up is generation gap. The next concept that I want to take up is generation gap. Generation gap. This is the next concept that I would want to take up, which is generation gap. Now, when we look at generation gap, it is simply the friction between the elders and the younger people. Now, this friction, the question is it really a conflict between a child and a parent? Or is it a conflict between the two social milieus, two time periods in which the child is born and brought up and in which the parent was born and brought up? So there are times when you from 9th, 10th grade onwards, you start developing your own perception of the world by the way in which you're living. So that is the time when your clashes start arising. Don't you have these conflicts with your parents? They say, don't go out, don't be up too late, don't use too much of gizmos, gadgets. But your answer is because you're a product of that milieu. Your life cannot work without the use of gadgets. Your homeworks, your assignments, everything is uploaded on those gadgets. So here, the kind of friction that develops is not a friction between a parent and a child. It is simply a friction between two social milieus. So that is one aspect. Then another thing that I want to bring to your notice is that the changing job market. If you look around, the job market is changing. For example, suddenly when industrialization came, there was a major movement in the industries and agricultural laborers went jobless and they started moving to the cities. When they started moving to the cities, definitely there were not so much of job opportunities which could absorb them. So there was a big chunk of population that remained unemployed. This was a scenario, say, in the second half of the 20th century. However, by the time last 10 years of the 20th century and the first 2 decades of the 21st century has seen globalization. Now, globalization brings with it a lot of opportunities. It changes the complete scenario of the world. And so you see that globalization generates new kind of jobs. There is a shift. Suddenly we see that some industries become very important. For example, the call centers become very important because of the MNCs. The IT industry suddenly becomes so important. So certain jobs are jobs like web designing and computers, content development, digital marketing. These things suddenly become very important. So do you see sociology, as a student of sociology, you are witnessing, you are analyzing all the changes that are happening over the period of time. Next, you also will dwell upon certain critical and concerning issues which I'm sure you have read them and studied them in class 9th and 10th. Now, these issues are, for example, issues of communalism, issues of, because our country is secular and we have n number of religions being given the choice to practice and profess their religion. We chose to be a secular country. The next issue is of casteism. Now, casteism becomes a very, very important point in the Indian history and in the Indian society, because casteism is age old, it's deep rooted in the Indian society. But over the period of time, from the time ancient period to the medieval to the modern and in post independence and now in the 21st century, if you look at the transition of caste system, it is major, from deeply being rooted in the society as a social thing. Today in caste system and casteism remain more potent as a political force than as a social force. When I say as a political force, I mean, and which you already have studied in class 10, it becomes more like a means of vote bank politics. Now, then, of course, the issue which I had just discussed, like gender inequalities. These again are issues that, become very important. And why I am dwelling in these issues is because these are the issues, children. In both the books, you will be finding these issues throughout. Now, this was a brief about the journey that you will be taking through in this academic year. Now, if I show you, you have these two books. One is the Indian Society and the other one is Social Development and Social Development in India. So, Indian Society as a book is dealing with all those aspects which have been there in India, right from probably, demographic structure to social institutions, continuity and change, to market as a social inclusion. If you look at its content, it talks about, let me take you through this book. It is talking all about the various aspects through which the Indian society has gone through. So you have the first chapter I have already dealt with you. It is a non-evaluative chapter, but it is very important that we had to do this chapter before take up the journey ahead. Now, your first chapter, the second chapter is your demographic structure in the Indian society, and here it will, which we'll be doing in the next class, it deals with the demography. What is demography? What are certain key terms in demography, and understanding the different age structures in India, in urban and in rural area, and what is the impact of that on society and economy, etc. The next chapter, chapter 3, will deal with social institutions, continuity and change. That again I have just dwelt. This chapter will talk about, because caste has always been a very, very significant factor in the Indian society. So casteism is something that how over the period the concept of casteism has changed, and now what it means, which I have just told you. The next is the social cultural dimensions of a market, where you study that market is not just the, Adam Smith talks about that it is not just an economic institution, but a lot happens in the market, and because of market a lot of things happen. So market as a social and institution. And then you have The chapter number 5 is patterns of social inequalities and exclusion. Again, here we will be we will be studying about issues like caste, gender, tribal, disabled. So inclusion, inequality and exclusion. So we will be talking about all the vulnerable groups. We will be talking about all the marginalized sections of the society. Again, the next is about the chapter 6 deals with the challenge of culture and diversity, and challenges of cultural diversity, which is directly related to something that you have studied, unity in diversity, because India chose to be a diverse country. India chose to be a secular country. India chose to give importance to linguistic and ethnic distinctions of the people, and this is how our whole country is crafted. This is how our constitution is developed. We give a lot of importance to diversity in our country. So this is all about book 1 that you will be dealing about. Giving you a small brief about book 2 is, again, it is talking about structural change. So when you talk about structural change, it is talking about the institutions that have changed in terms of industries, and what structures have changed over the period of time, what new structures. So this is talking about, then you have the cultural change. The cultural changes, ancient, medieval, during the colonial period and after the colonial period. So what are the changes in the culture? What cultural changes have come, the Indian society has seen? Then is, of course, the story of Indian democracy, which again is a topic which is very familiar to you, that how the constitution was made, what are the different rights that we have, and how the democracy was established and how it continues. The next is change and development in rural society. Again, you will have an in-depth knowledge of the rural changes that happened in the rural period over a period of time, from ancient, medieval, British and post colonial period. Similarly, changes and development in the urban society. The next chapter would be globalization and social change. Again, a very familiar chapter to you, because this chapter in class 10 you have studied in economics, you have studied in history as well, making of the global world. So what changes? What is globalization and how globalization has changed the world? The next is mass media and communication. Again, a very, very interesting topic, right from the time when the radio became important, and the radio was first time it came, to the changes till the various changes that you see, the print media, the digital media, the mass media, and how media is changing over a period of time. This is an extremely interesting chapter. And lastly, we see it is the social movements, that is like movement of the tribals, movement of the women's movement, tribals movement, other movements which are very important. Let me also, you also have with you a presentation which gives you a breakup of your syllabus content. Book 1, which is Indian Society. The weightage of book 1 is 32 marks, 6 marks each chapter. You can refer to your the presentation that I have sent you. And book 2, that is Indian Society, is of 48 marks. This makes it 80 marks, and 20 marks will be based on the project. So I end today's lecture, and hoping that you will be doing homework, the questions that I am sending you, and also I would appreciate if you read chapter 1 of Indian society. Thank you, children, and have a lovely day. Stay at home and stay safe.